I'm Timothy Vigil, and this is Just Another Word podcast, the Word of the Day podcast for storytellers. F is for fugitive. He wanted to be where no one would know who he was. He wanted to escape from himself. Oscar Wilde, The Picture of Dorian Gray. We often think of a fugitive as a figure in a high-speed chase, a siren wailing in the distance as they disappear down a dark alleyway. I think for many of us, we might picture Harrison Ford running away from Tommy Lee Jones. But is this definition of fugitive as far as we should take it? Because the word carries a weight far beyond the criminal, at least its history does. See, fugitive itself is a feeling of being in motion because staying still is a danger. The word fugitive started its life in the Latin language. It comes from fugere, meaning to flee. Interestingly, fugitive was initially just another synonym for the word refugees. Both described someone fleeing a location to escape danger, whether that danger was war or persecution, or a ghost from their past. It didn't matter, the two words meant the same thing, but over time, they grew apart. See, in modern language, we use a lot of very specific words, refugee or transient, that might be more technically accurate in certain situations. But it's important to remember that other words had the same meaning at one point. Fugitive, for example, meant refugee. The two shared an interesting connection, but the question that we have to ask ourselves is it better to always use the most precise word, or are there occasions where a more evocative one could do something for your story? There's a power in calling a wandering character a fugitive rather than a traveler. It implies a reason for the movement. It suggests that they aren't just going to somewhere, they are running from something. But we often just think of this as someone who is running from the law. But a fugitive doesn't need to be running from anything that's really chasing them. Dorian Gray was a fugitive of himself. He wanted to escape himself. Perhaps the most interesting and least used definition of fugitive is as an adjective, though. For a short duration, something that is likely to evaporate, deteriorate, or disappear. It's difficult to retain, and it's elusive. Think of a fugitive scent on the wind, or a fugitive thought that vanishes the moment you reach for a pen. I often think of that fugitive thing that you needed to do. You walk into a new room, and that thing that you needed to do in that room is gone from your head. Your task literally fled from you. This connects back to our last word, ephemeral, which we talked about on the last episode, but with a sharper edge. A fugitive thought isn't just disappearing, it's actively trying to escape your grasp. I think this works really well in concert with ephemeral. Thinking of the different ways that we can use the two words in concert could create a really interesting narrative momentum. The word fugitive has some really great uses throughout history that we as storytellers can try and take and use. There was a group at the University of Vanderbilt just after World War I. They were a group of young poets, and they took the name for themselves. They called themselves the Vanderbilt Fugitives. And they published a magazine for like 2 or 3 years, and they called it The Fugitive, drawing their imagery from their experience as Southerners. But they were fleeing the old, stale conventions of poetry that they were used to and looking for a way to express a new and complicated truth. For them, being a fugitive was a badge of intellectual rebellion. They were intentionally fleeing the constraints of the art that they were making. And this is a really interesting way to use the word. And I think that there's a lot of great ways that as storytellers, we can take and learn from the Vanderbilt fugitives and use fugitive in our writing and our storytelling. As storytellers, the fugitive is one of our most versatile archetypes. Think of a character who's escaping something external, the character eluding justice or running from a villain or running from the pressures of their life. They are a fugitive from the pressure. But you could also have the eternal escape, like Dorian Gray. His experience, the character who changes and flees because they can no longer stand to be the person they used to be. But maybe they can't get away. They are constantly running from who they are, but they can't get away. A fugitive in their own mind. This is a really powerful way to tell a story because it evokes something that so many of us feel all the time throughout our lives. By using the word fugitive, you can infuse your story with a sense of urgency. You're not just describing a person, you're describing a state of flight. You're putting momentum into the story. You could call someone a criminal. We could use that initial thought that we had and call them a criminal or someone who's on the run. But a fugitive does that in one word, and it elevates. It's a single word that is evocative, so we can use it for its initial meaning. But fugitive can mean so much more as well. Because we can look at historical uses of the word and recapture them for our writing. It might be a little odd, but it does some beautiful things. Think, historically, fugitive and fleeting were once two sides of the same coin. In its earliest usage, the word fugitive described anything that was in the act of passing away. Beauty or time, even a summer breeze. To call a moment fugitive was to acknowledge its inherent instability. It was something that by its very nature was already escaping. While we now use fleeting for time and fugitive for people, remembering this shared history allows us as storytellers to treat a character's presence as something just as delicate and temporary as a fading sunset. The words are connected and a bit interchangeable. Try using fugitive in a place you would use fleeting and see how it might elevate your prose, how it might change the way your story is moving. Or try using fleeting instead of fugitive. See how you can interplay with the words. And remember that fugitive and refugee share a connection. In the end, whether it's a person eluding a courtroom or a thought escaping your mind, a fugitive reminds us that everything in motion has a reason for being in motion. As storytellers, we have to ask ourselves, what's chasing them? What are they running from? And what happens when they finally run out of road? You might not put all of that into the story you're telling, but knowing that, knowing what all is going on in them, knowing the truth allows you to get in the head of the character and write them better, tell them better. Precision is for the law. This is your background. You know this. But evocativeness, that is what is in your story. Don't just tell us they're moving. Show us that they are running from something, that they are fugitive. You have been listening to Just Another Word podcast with your host, Timothy Vigil. For more information, go to timothywigil.com.